I was just servicing my Revox and thought, well, I haven't done a video about it, so I thought I'd do a quick little video about the Revox A77 deck I have. This is the one in the, they think they call this like a suitcase model because it's got a case and it's got the speakers built in, so you don't have to connect it to an amplifier. It's got two stereo amplifiers built in and two separate speakers. It's a two-track machine using the whole width of the tape for two channels, so you can't really turn the tape over if you're recording in stereo. I prefer, it's a high-speed machine as well. There would have been a plate over here originally to cover up the 3 3/4. It's a 7.5 inches and 15 inches per second machine, so the high-speed version. I do find with the 4-track machines that you get a bit of crosstalk, and even if you don't get crosstalk from brand new tape, when you've made the recording, you tend to come back to the recording and play it back, and there is detectable crosstalk often on 4-track tapes. So I always prefer the 2-track machine because you just don't get the crosstalk at all. It just doesn't exist. I'll go through the controls. That's rewind. That's fast forward. Then you've got stop, play and record. To arm the tracks, you press both those buttons in, and that arms those 2 tracks. This is your input source, so microphone high and low, left channel or channel 1, the same for channel 2, and then you've got the recording from channel 1 to channel 2 and recording from channel 2 to channel 1, which will give you the sort of echo effect. This is your recording type input, whatever standard you've been using or the tape it's been made in, and then you have your channel source, so this stereo plays back both channels, or channel 1, channel 2, or a mixture of the two. You've got a reel motors off button here, which turns the reel tables off if you're doing editing, and then the internal speakers on and off. You've got a DIN connector and phono connectors on the back, as you'd expect, and a remote control connector, analog tape counter, which is just driven from the belt off the supply reel, I think, from memory. And then the power, you've got the size of reels that you select. So obviously I've got these big reels at the moment. I only have a few tapes that I play back, sort of 10-inch tapes or whatever I play back on this machine. One of them being the tape I've got in here at the moment, and that's a tape I made with music I've written and recorded when I was using multi-track tape recorders way back in late 90s, early 2000s, very early 2000s, late 90s. There was quite a lot of analog equipment, tape equipment on the market at the time that you could get really cheaply. Nobody seemed to be interested in analog tape format back in the late 90s, early 2000s. This was all sort of considered rubbish, really. But it was about that time I got into, I'd taken music at school, and I was writing my own songs and things, and only lasted for a few years. But this tape is one of the tapes that I had as a master tape. I used to use a multi-track recorder and then mix it down to a stereo tape. I didn't use this machine to make this tape on. It was actually a TX machine, 32.2B. I actually used to mix everything down to. But I can play this tape without getting any copyright strikes because it's my own music. So it won't be very good, but it'll give you an idea of how these machines can sound. So at the moment that's on stereo, so I'll change the channels. That's channel 1, that's channel 2, that's mono, and then stereo. There's 4 speakers in this. 1, 2, over to the other end. This is the optical sensor, so when it detects that there's no tape blocking the little sensor at the top here, it then would stop automatically. That's enough of that one, let's forward it on. I have serviced this machine. I replaced the capacitors in it, and there was a couple of dead transistors in this. And I've got another one which is the 4-track version and the slower speed, 3 3/4 inches and 7.5 inches. But again, it's got the same dead transistors, so I shall have to order. I think I've got to order one more transistor to make that one work. This tape actually was a sticky tape which I ended up baking to try to get the glue to re-adhere to the magnetic surface. If you know anything about tapes, you'll know that there's a thing called sticky tape syndrome, which is what this tape suffered from, but since I've baked it, it now seems to be okay. So my plan is to archive this tape next, because if this tape dies, then basically I don't have anything left. I don't have this backed up in any other format. That's the balance control. And that's just the tape standard. And unusually the VU meters don't work on playback on these machines. That isn't a fault, that they don't actually do it. These only work when it's in recording mode, and people are sort of a bit worried when they get these machines and think, oh, why don't the VU meters work? Well, they weren't designed to, not on playback, only on record. I mean, basically once you've recorded the tape and you haven't overloaded it, there's no need for you to see what the VU meters are doing, really. It's just they're only really used for recording anyhow. So that's the Revox A77. I'm not sure, I think this is only like a Mark 1. Possibly a Mark 2, but I don't think it's a very late one. I think it's quite an early machine. And now it's all working properly. They do work very well, but the downside of these machines, as I said, is the inaccessibility of the heads. You cannot really get in here very easily to clean these. So from a professional, they're no good as a professional machine, because you can't get in there very easily to service them, clean the heads and things. So yes, it's the only downside to a Revox A77 is the rather awkward placement of the heads. And as all these tapes are aging now, the need to clean your tape heads is well, you need to do it quite often, unless you're, because I don't think anyone's making brand new tape anymore, so it's all sort of old stock tape, and it's a bit more sheddy than it used to be, because it's now coming up to being, you know, some of the tapes are ancient. So yeah, it can make them rather an awkward machine to keep running all the time, just because the tape heads aren't the most accessible.